Mayor Rotering.
Good morning, Chairman Durbin, Ranking Member Grassley, and distinguished members of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Thank you for inviting me to discuss today how we stop mass shootings. My name is Nancy Rotering. I'm the mayor of Highland Park, Illinois, an all-American Midwestern town. I was at the Highland Park 4th of July parade shooting, and I will be haunted forever. Before I tell you my story, I want to recognize the brave police and fire personnel who ran directly into danger to save lives. They did everything right. They miraculously caught the shooter within hours, and they are what true American heroes look like. It was a perfect summer day. The excitement of 3,000 parade goers was palpable, especially since this was our first parade in 2 years post-pandemic. Festive floats, a sea of children and adults in red, white, and blue waving American flags. At 10 a.m., my council and I kicked off our parade. Music and cheering were all we could hear as we headed down the street. I looked left and waved to my husband in the crowd. What I didn't know at that moment was that just to my right, on a one-story rooftop, a 21-year-old was preparing to traumatize my hometown forever with an assault weapon. Shortly after we proceeded down the parade route, I turned to my colleagues and I questioned why the marching band had stopped playing music and was only playing a drum cadence. Tat, 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 tat. I then saw a sea of marching band members sprinting down the sidewalk, some with tubas still entwined around their bodies. I realized later that the sound I had heard wasn't drum cadence, it was the sound of an assault weapon. My cell phone buzzed, and a shooter on the roof of a local store had shot dozens of rounds into the parade crowd. Fire and police vehicles were roaring towards us. We pivoted and started an emergency evacuation. We were screaming, "Run, shooter!" Adults stared back, not comprehending, but the kids knew immediately this wasn't a drill, and they yelled to everybody, "Run and hide." They knew what was happening. Grandparents were running for cover, toddlers were being placed in dumpsters for safety, and the bodies of those who were hit were scattered on the ground. We now know that 22-year-old Cassie Goldstein told her mom, Katie, to run, but Katie was hit in the chest, and Cassie had to tell her mother she loved her, but she couldn't stop because bullets were still flying. She kept running to safety, hiding behind a garbage can, and when the shooting stopped, Cassie returned to find her mother lifeless. Local doctors and volunteer community emergency response teams covered the dead and tended to the severely wounded as paramedics arrived. The shooter was still at large. A photo of a teary-eyed toddler clutching a blanket flashed on my phone. Whose child was this? People were hiding in an underground garage, wondering why nobody was looking for this missing child. Later, we learned that it was 2-year-old Aiden McCarthy with dried blood on his legs, socks, and his tiger sneaker. He had been found under his father's body and carried to safety. No one was frantically looking for him because both his mother and father had been murdered at the parade. Governor J.B. Pritzker and I attended the funerals. We heard about Jackie Sondheim's love of knitting and Eduardo Uvaldo missing his 70th birthday just 4 days later on July 8th. We heard how hot shrapnel had melted into the arms and legs of his relatives. Stephen Strauss's widow asked, was he unconscious? Was he alone? And the response was no. Police Commander Jerry Cameron did CPR and stayed with him the entire time. Several of Nicholas Toledo's grandchildren attended his funeral on crutches, gunshot victims themselves. The impact of the gunfire on their grandfather required a closed casket. Sitting with him at the parade, they experienced firsthand the gory effect that this ammunition with this velocity has when hitting a human head. Dr. Keely Roberts left the hospital immediately after her own major surgery to be with her 8-year-old son, Cooper, whose shredded esophagus, ripped liver, and severed spinal cord continue to threaten his life. His twin brother, Luke, was shot in the leg. Liz Turnipseed's 3-year-old daughter was handed to strangers while Liz was rushed to the hospital because a bullet pierced her pelvis. She has shrapnel in her leg, and she may never walk unassisted again. Less than a minute is all it took for a person with an assault weapon to shoot 83 rounds into a crowd, forever changing so many lives. And the most disturbing part, this is the norm in our country. Highland Park had the uniquely American experience of a 4th of July parade turn into what has now become a uniquely American experience of a mass shooting. How do we call this freedom? Other advanced nations live free of fear of gun violence, and we know that mental health issues exist everywhere in our world. American mayors, and I've talked to several in these past few weeks, fear not if, but when a mass shooting is going to hit our towns. What's different about the U.S.? U.S. has civilian access to assault weapons and large-capacity magazines. That is the only differentiating factor. In 2013, in the wake of Sandy Hook, we as a city banned assault weapons and large-capacity magazines. We knew that a federal ban would be the most effective, but a local ban reflecting the values of our community was our only option under the law. Local governments cannot do this alone. Congress must take action. You must federally ban assault weapons and large-capacity magazines. Today is the day to start saving lives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Rotering.